briefings prepared by our European Parliamentary Research Services, that it is an extremely good service we have here in Parliament, that it is providing information for us here at the European Parliament, but also for all of you. So please feel free to take a copy. And if you don't want to take paper with you back home, there is a QR code you can scan, and you could have access to the whole document as well. And probably that could lead you to other documents and other studies done by our, as I say, wonderful European Parliament Research Services. So now, as I was saying, we start panel 2, that it will be a bit shorter panel. Where I have, yes, that here. Okay. So too many papers, sorry about that. So the first speaker will focus on the situation in Ukraine. As you know, or you must know, that this committee follows closely what's going on in Ukraine and fully support the work towards peace and justice in Ukraine. The European Parliament resolution on the 5th May 2022 on the impact of war against Ukraine on women originated from this committee. So Mrs. Yelyzaveta, Boryskina, gender equality and inclusion expert, coordinator of Women's Lobby of SD Platform in Ukraine. So thank you very much for traveling to here, and you have the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much for everyone being here and staying here, despite all of the busy days. I know that you're all busy, so thank you very much for being here with us today. It's a great honor and a pleasure to stand here in front of you and talk about Ukrainian women at the topic of peace and the security. I'm actually an activist and a person, from the middle-class family who just, started my activism 6 or 7 years ago and decided to protect women's rights because faced the gender-based violence. So that's my behind story. And there are a lot of them happening right now in the war times in Ukraine. But in times of war, women sometimes are played as the victims, and they are not. You know that there are 60,000 women in Ukrainian defense right now in the military, and they work really hard in order to protect our country. However, among all of them, there are only 2 generals, if the statistics did not change while I was traveling here. Yet globally, less than 10% of peace negotiators are women, as we know. And this is not just a missed opportunity, but a failure to achieve lasting peace. We cannot afford to ignore half of the population when building security frameworks. Today I'm here to show you what we do in my organization, in Women's Lobby, and how we can all stand together and support each other in inspiring and supporting women in security and military defense. About the resolution. This landmark resolution recognized for the first time the essential role of women in preventing and resolving conflicts. It is built on 4 pillars: participation, protection, prevention, and recovery. For Ukraine, it's not only about what is written in the resolution, but this is our action plan as of right now, especially at such criminal times. The war has demonstrated the critical role of women in security and defense. Women's perspectives in peace negotiations lead to more durable agreements. As for March 2025, it's only 23% of women in Ukrainian parliament, which I think is not the best number. And it's actually lowering. Ukraine has taken significant steps in integrating gender perspectives in security policy, but challenges remain. We still face stigmatization, gender-based violence, and underrepresentation, not only because of the gender, but because it seems that in such tough times, women are too soft to take any leading roles, especially in security and military. Despite progress, significant barriers persist. First, it's underrepresentation, as I mentioned before. While more women serve in Ukraine's military than ever before, they remain underrepresented in leadership roles and decision-making positions. Women's lobby advocates for women, especially veterans, whose mental health has been affected by war, who needs constant support and reintegration. Second point is gender-based violence, especially in the conflict zones that are not under the control of the Ukraine as of right now. We do not have many reports, and I know that the gender-based violence are still happening there, as well as it is happening in, controlled territories. Sexual violence has been systematically used as a weapon of war against Ukrainian women and girls. Women's lobby advocates for a stricter implementation of the Istanbul Convention in Ukraine. We want women of Ukraine to feel safe, especially when they are home. Imagine you're handling your family, job, maybe volunteering, and experience gender-based violence at the same time. And when you report it to authorities, it might be just called family issues. Can you please solve it yourself, And no action taken, unfortunately. And the third point is resistance to policy implementation. It's about women's equal payment and ensuring that women will be equally represented at the policy-making institutions and leading roles. For example, the payment gap ensures not only the lowering of mental health issues because of some stability, but also welcoming back women refugees who are here in your countries, in European Union, and in so many more countries. And reintegrating women veterans who are also coming from army to stay at home. The action plan that we propose, first, promoting women's leadership in security and peace building. We need to promote women into leadership roles in the military and security sectors, as all of the previous speakers said and colleagues of mine. We can do that, for example, with special trainings and programs. We ask our EU partners to support mentorship programs for Ukrainian women in defense, diplomacy, and politics. It doesn't have to be funding specifically. It just can be expertise, because I know that we face the same enemy. Integrating gender perspectives in security policy means 2 points for us, 2 actions. First, security forces should receive gender-sensitive training to address the unique needs of women in conflict and post-conflict situations. And second, women-led organizations on the ground must be involved in rebuilding Ukraine, ensuring that reconstruction is inclusive. And it is about women in business as well, and women entrepreneurs. To sum up, we call on European partners to ensure that funding and support for Ukraine includes gender-responsive investment. And it's not, again, about the financial point, but also about the road mapping and about your expertise that you can bring to us and you can share with us. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is not about symbolism, for me specifically. It is about effectiveness. Security cannot be achieved when half of the population is silenced. Policies must translate into real action, leadership opportunities. Each of us had a woman who is our example, and maybe it's our mother, our sister, or some superstar that we follow online. And I want to call on all of you here, all of the women and men, to be those people who inspire, who take actions, not only for ourselves, but for other women in whole Europe. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Our second speaker will focus on the deteriorating situation of women in Afghanistan. We really follow here with horror what is happening there, probably one of the worst places to be a woman and a girl in the world. So Mrs. Mariam Safi, she's founding executive director of the Organization for Policy Research and Development Study, drops in Afghanistan, and you have the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished guests. If this was 7 years ago, I would have had a very different speech prepared. I would have talked to you about the percentage of women in the security sector who are working. I would have talked to you about the number of women that are in Parliament and the achievements and the strides that they were making. I would have spoken to you about women's political leadership at the ministerial level, deputy ministerial level. And then I would have gone into the challenges, and I would have said that we're not meeting the quotas, that we need a more stronger and enabling environment. And I would have listed those challenges, very similar to the challenges that were listed in our earlier panel today. The achievements of the 2 decades that we had before the fall of the Republic were not just the achievements of the women of Afghanistan, but they were also achievements thanks to your support, shouldering that responsibility in advocating for Afghan women. Now, as I stand here before you, I am going to be talking about an Afghanistan that is very different, one that I cannot recognize. And the information, the data that I'll be sharing with you today is from the gender segregated data that we collect in Afghanistan still, and the evidence-based policy research that we produce. And my job basically today is to share those messages that we've gathered in Afghanistan with you. Afghanistan is, in fact, enduring the worst women's crisis in the world. Since the Taliban's return to power, they have issued over 150 decrees, 98 of which directly target women's rights. These systematic restrictions have turned Afghanistan into an open-air prison for women and girls, dismantling decades of progress and embedding a deeply conservative, exclusionary ideology into every facet of life. I urge you to recognize that this is not just an Afghan crisis. It has regional and global implications. It is accelerating the global rollback on gender equality. It's fueling mass displacement and creating security risks that will not remain confined within Afghanistan's borders for too long. At the heart of this gender apartheid lies the Taliban's latest morality law, the law on the propagation of virtue and prevention of vice. This law has institutionalized the oppression of women, erasing their presence from society and embedding fear into their daily existence. During our focus group discussions, which we hold regularly with our women's peace circles across the country, Afghan women shared with us the devastating impact of this on their lives. One respondent said to us, "Before, we could express our thoughts. Now, we cannot even speak. We fear our phones will be checked in the streets. Women are living in constant fear, our daily lives filled with anxiety. The only thing left for us is the oxygen we breathe. Nothing else is by our choice." This law is not just a continuation of previous Taliban decrees. It is a game changer. It codifies the Taliban's absolute control of Afghan women, leaving no room for alternative governance. Initially, Their restrictions targeted education, employment, and freedom of speech. But now they have escalated to full societal control. This law enforces mandatory full-body veiling, total segregation from men, and also now women from women, and a ban on women's voices in public. The devastating impact on women in society, which is revealed in the data that we collect through our Bishnau initiative, Bishnau, which means listen, and Dari, shows to us that out of a little over 7,000 women we surveyed just this past December and January, 33% cited job loss as the biggest challenge after the implementation of this law, followed by 25% who said loss of access to non-formal education. 18% reported severely restricted mobility in public spaces. 55% observed a sharp regression in societal attitudes towards gender norms. 49% now wear a full hijab or niqab to avoid harassment by the Taliban when they're outside. 20% have completely restricted their movements, unable to leave their homes. But this is not just about restricting women's freedoms. The Taliban have created a climate of enforced complicity, turning men into enforcers, turning men into enforcers of these laws under the threat of punishment. One of our focus group respondents told us, men are warned that if their female relatives violate these laws and are arrested, they will be held responsible. This has forced men to enforce these laws at home now. Despite the Taliban's attempts to project unity, women's rights remain a key fault within the regime. There are signs of internal dissent. These cracks in the unity present to us a moment of strategic action. Some senior Taliban figures have criticized bans on girls' education. Fractures within the movement suggest that extreme control over women is not a universally accepted strategy. These cracks present an opening. We must capitalize on these divisions, not ignore them. Even the smallest cracks can become pathways to change, but only if the international community, all of us together, act decisively with a principled approach to engagement, one that is firmly centered on human rights, particularly women's rights, while simultaneously pursuing accountability measures. Engagement cannot occur without accountability. The strength of one depends on the other. Support for accountability measures would not only send the Taliban a clear message that their crimes are being monitored by the international community, but also offers a beacon of hope to Afghans that the Taliban will not get away with these crimes. In 2024, we saw some really great renewed momentum for accountability, which has been really encouraging. In September 19th, the European Parliament's adoption of a resolution condemning the targeting of women in Afghanistan under Taliban rule and calling for the recognition of gender apartheid as a crime against humanity was a historic step. In September of 25th, the efforts of Germany, Netherlands, Australia, and Canada, supported by 20 other countries, taking Afghanistan to the International Court of Justice for the Taliban's violations under CEDAW, also generated immense momentum and hope. And then in November, the UNGA 6th Committee decided to move the draft Crimes Against Humanity Treaty to negotiations, an important milestone for accountability. There is now need for continued advocacy to ensure gender apartheid is codified through the CAH. And lastly, the recent announcements of arrest warrants for Taliban leader and his chief justice by the prosecutor of the ICC was very welcome news. These arrest warrants challenge normalization of the Taliban's repressive policies and encourage more principled engagement. These steps towards accountability have been driven by the brave resistance and tireless advocacy of Afghan women civil society actors and advocates and human rights defenders, researchers, academics, both inside of Afghanistan, where they fight under incredibly difficult conditions, and also those of us who are outside, along with our international allies, which is all of yourselves. We must double down on investment on Afghan women. This is the most effective counter-narrative to the Taliban's authoritarian regime. Afghan women across the country are not accepting their exclusion from public life. They are not showing any signs of giving up. They're still coming to work to deliver health and protection services and finding new ways to meet these needs of their communities. They're still running organizations and businesses, many of which are operating underground. Others are defying these restrictions through the act of leaving their homes unaccompanied, which is, in Afghanistan, it's not a simple thing to do. All of this work needs our continued support. The resilience and leadership of Afghan women is the greatest threat to the Taliban's regime. Unfortunately, in the last couple of weeks, with the funding cuts announced by the Trump administration, there has been a drastic impact on these efforts already. In one day, 50 civil society organizations in Afghanistan, women-led organizations, shut down and closed their doors. In conclusion, I urge you today to please make women's rights a red line in all of your diplomatic and strategic engagements. Hold the Taliban accountable through legal mechanisms like the ICJ and the ICC proceedings. Ensure sustained and flexible funding for Afghan women and civil society actors who are on the front line, fighting for their democracy and for their rights. Afghanistan must not become a forgotten crisis. I know the world's attention is divided, and that the global balance is shifting, and that domestic priorities are rising. But we must not lose this momentum. We cannot lose the little civic space we have all built in the country. The Taliban, let me be clear, have a 100-year plan. We, at best, have a 6-month strategy. If we do not act strategically and collectively, we will lose more than Afghanistan. We will lose the global fight against authoritarianism, injustice, and gender equality. Together we can move mountains. We certainly have done it in the past, and we could do it again, but together. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Sometimes we really don't know what else to do because we really want to do more. Please really count with us, especially to keep pushing that in this world that is becoming, I think I hate that word, more transactional. We will keep this red line on human rights. We want this international order to be back, to be an international order on human rights. So thank you very much for your fight, both of you. That is also a fight. And but please count with us and feel that we are as much closer as we can. And if we can do more, we will be doing that for sure. And now we move to our discussion. This time we have a bit more time, not much, but a bit more. So we can go to 1.5 minutes each, but please don't go beyond that, otherwise we will lose the time we have, and we will not have time to give back the floor back to our speakers at the end of the discussion. So we'll work as we have done before. So one member of the European Parliament and then 2 members of national parliaments. So the first one will be Maria Walsh from EPP, and then it will go Annemarie Eite from the Netherlands, and Katia Di Giovanni from Malta. So now, Maria, the floor is yours from 1 minute and a half. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. And first, let me acknowledge all the women and our allies in the room, in particular our EPP outreach. We have many representatives here in the room, a part of the EPP family. Listen, female leaders, peace builders and activists face cyber attacks, online harassment and disinformation designed to silence them and erode their credibility. Deepfake technology, and for those in the room who might not know, 96% of deepfakes are pornographic in style. 99% of the victim is women and young girls of recent reports. And that technology and manipulated media are being weaponized to distort reality, create distrust and instability. And we need to ensure existing AI and tech policies are appropriate and move at the speed of technology. And I'd really love to hear from you all and anybody in the room in terms of what we can do here as policymakers, not just in this committee, but across the many others in this Parliament, because gender mainstreaming has to be driven from all committees, not just this. Is it through the DSA, the AI Act? How do we underbelly national policies to also support and to target the perpetrator and tech giants in this very, very challenging and pendulum swing world of disinformation and attack on women and young girls? Thank you very, very much, and may I wish everyone a very happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, Maria. And now I would like to give the floor to Annemarie Eite from the Netherlands.
Thank you, Chairman. Honourable members of Parliament, distinguished colleagues, I'm honoured to be here and to hear all those inspiring voices from across our Europe about women's rights. I'm deeply touched by your contributions about women in Ukraine and Afghanistan, and I realise the long road we still have to go in our cause. I'm actually happy to see that it's not only just women's talk today, but that there are also men participating. As another speaker said today, we need you to make. I want to end with the sense of urgency that is needed with the threat that we are facing today. We need you all, men and women, and I want to repeat General Buchholz's words. We cannot afford to waste talent. Let us not forget that the strength of women lies in protecting our values, our society and our world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Katia De Giovanni, Malta.
Grazie, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Malta was always ready to be a neutral space for peace discussions to address wars. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ian Borge, has spoken to the officials in the United States to facilitate a summit that reiterates the importance of security in Ukraine and also in Europe. We believe in the presence of women in this process. Malta has a lot of diplomatic women that are successful. It's not the military that is strong, but diplomacy. Maltese Prime Minister has spoken about Malta as a motor for peace. There are no winners in war. Only peace brings progress. Malta has always preached peace, even when it spoke on its own. Our country will insist always on the resolution on a table. In Malta, we've already had discussions on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Malta will remain committed to promote dialogue and use its neutral position so that we have peace. If we insist on peace, all abuse will finish. If we emphasize peace, women and men will benefit. If we insist on peace, everyone will benefit.
Thank you very much. I have not announced the next speaker, but since she knows quite well the House, we are happy to see her back here. I would like to give the floor to Beata Juric from Slovakia. So the floor is yours for 1 minute and a half.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, I'd like to start by asking you to take 5 seconds to imagine how the world would look like today if the US president was a woman. Just imagine Do we still need to discuss why we need more women in positions of power, really? Now let me take this opportunity to say thank you for all Ukrainian women, not only for women, but especially for women. They fight for us, for life, every day. Nobody should ask them to say thank you. Now it's on us, on the Europeans, to say thanks. Today at the Council, but also by ensuring their fast accession to the EU, and let them be one of us in this House. So please, dear colleagues from the European Parliament, as well as from national parliaments, let's help together one of the most courageous and strongest women that I know, Olha Stefanishina, Ukrainian Minister of the EU integration, to make her country become one of us. For her country, for peace, for security of all of us, for women, and for peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is a nice dream, the one you said to imagine us at the very beginning. Next speakers, I will mention 5 because since there are more members from the national chambers to ask for the floor, we will be giving the floor to a member of the European Parliament and then 4 members from the national parliaments. So we'll be first Johanna Schwerin-Wilgus, and then Mrs. Stefania Pucciarelli from Italy, then Mrs. Helena Wilhelmsson from Sweden, Mrs. Agne Bilotaite from Lithuania, Mrs. Mariola Aranda from Spain. So, Joanna, the floor is yours from Socialists and Democrats.
Okay, I will speak in Polish. First of all, I would like to thank you for your testimonies. You have clearly demonstrated that war, escalation can take place everywhere, that things may change overnight, even if we think that everything is fine, that we live in a country where our rights are respected. Afghanistan is a very good example. The country that I am from, Poland, is also a case in point. We had, until some point, good reproductive health regulations, and at some point they were overturned, and women started to die because they have no access to medical care, pregnant women. So even if at now everything seems fine in France, Belgium, Portugal, and Spain, you must be aware that backlash, that return to bad practices, to war, the scenario that happened in Afghanistan can take place in any country where things seems to be fine. So you mentioned a red line when you were talking about Afghanistan, and there is also a red line for us. We must always have at the back of my mind that backlash may take place. And when this happens, we must stay strong, we must stay united, because we mustn't be complacent. Backlash can happen everywhere. And I think that this is the red line that we should remember about today. And I would like to thank you once again for what you've said here today. We are with you, with our hearts in full solidarity with Ukraine, with Afghanistan. We stand together with the women from Congo and Sudan, because a pain of a raped woman, a pain of a raped child or an abducted child is always the same, regardless from which country you are. The pain and the fear are always the same.
To Stefania Pucciarelli from Italy.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you. The situation in terms of geopolitics really makes us understand how important this women, peace and security agenda is. We need to transform the model for society as a whole. Italy had immediately supported 1325 and adopted various initiatives that need resources and investment and support, not only in terms of institutions, but also in civil society. We have our involvement in peace building as Italy, and we have been stepping up the role in terms of involvement in decision making. The Senate committee that I'm a member of has started different initiatives. We've got an observatory on women in Afghanistan, and there's a network of Afghan women to give voice to what's happening in their country. There's also the work to defend women's rights and to promote it as well. We have the women's leadership and gender equality work. We are discussing introducing into the criminal code the violence against women as a crime. We need to have women negotiating peace. We need their inclusive approach to have a 360-degree vision and to look at all of these social issues. Could you speak a bit more slowly? But I'd also have to ask you to conclude as well, says the chairwoman. Now, this is all helpful if you want to support the role of women, but at times like this, we need to have restructuring.
Now, Elena Wilhelmsson from Sweden, please. 1 minute and a half, please.
Thank you. And once again, a big thank you to the panel for your no, I forgot. I think I go to Swedish. Tack för era mycket.
Thank you for your very touching testimonies of a reality that is fairly difficult to imagine for many of us here. We know that rape is a weapon of war, systematic rape. This affects children, women, older women. And this despicable crime of war is perpetrated. In our contacts with women from Ukraine, we've discussed the morning after pill, abortion pills. So my question to the panel is whether this is something that is possible. Is this included in the support given to Ukraine? Can it be included? Are there any obstacles to actually provide organised support in the form of abortion pills? And if there are obstacles to this, how can we get around them? Thank you.
Thank you. Very concrete and good question. And now I would like to give the floor to Agnė Bilotaitė from Lithuania.
Ačiū labai už labai svarbią diskusiją.
Thank you for this important debate. The world has changed. The security situation has suffered a dramatic change, and our member states and the EU has to pay more attention to crisis management, civil security, and the role of women is very important here. We have too few women in leadership roles. Experience shows that participation of women has a good impact, and this is important for peace processes. We need to fight disinformation, which influences political processes as well. And finally, on Ukraine, what is happening today is a dreadful situation. Our clear position is very important. We have to support Ukraine as long as it takes, and we have to help Ukraine as a state, as a country, and it's women who face huge challenges. We need to take concrete action that are perceptible and are felt. Thank you.
Thank you. Y ahora me gustaría darle la palabra a Mariola Aranda.
Thank you. I give the floor to Mariola Aranda from the Spanish Senate. You have a minute and a half. Thank you very much. It is an honor to be able to speak in this forum for women, peace and security. We should work for full integration of the gender perspective in all our security and defense policy and support women's participation in armed forces, in international organizations that work for peace. We cannot just talk about gender equality. It is essential that we implement tangible policies that allow women to play roles of leadership in defense and security. The international community must continue to support female participation in peace negotiations, security missions, and in conflict resolution work. Women need to be given the necessary tools to participate in the security and defense process. And by doing so, we're not just supporting women's rights, but also ensuring that the needs and perspectives of women are taken into account in building a safe world for all. Women need to play a key role in defending their rights, in building peace and in consolidating security, which is truly universal and equitative. We know that this is not just a legal question. This is a question of culture, education, and other barriers that continue to limit women. We must work to guarantee that women's rights are protected, and protecting these through our defense, our security, and consolidating peace both on the international and national levels. This should translate into an integrated focus, seeking the active participation of women in all aspects linked to peace and security, and by safeguarding them from violence in conflicts. Thank you very much.
The last block, and I would like to give the floor to Abir Al-Salani from Renew Europe, here from the European Parliament. Abir, the floor is yours for 1.5 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, distinguished guests, for your testimonies, for your input, for the knowledge and competence that you are sharing with us. Of course, the fight for women's rights everywhere in the world is very high on our agenda, and not only in this committee. It's both in the Foreign Affairs Committee, it's in the FEM Committee, but also in LIBE, and also the Development Aid Committee. So in all arenas that we feminists in the European Parliament are being able to participate, of course, the human rights for all women is a very important issue. And on that subject, I have actually two questions. One is for our guest from Ukraine, and it is, what would you like to see when it comes to holding Russian war criminals accountable? Because, of course, the pain that is now subdued to Ukrainian victims is immense. But I think that ending impunity for war criminals is actually also preventing it from happening elsewhere. And when it comes to Afghanistan, dear Mariam, my question would be about the feminist foreign policy. We have had in this very committee discussions about including foreign affairs policies that have a very strong feminist perspectives. Unfortunately, we did not gain majority. What would that help the women in Afghanistan concretely, given the situation that we are having at hand? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we have 7 more speakers. So I will say the 7 names, and that's all. I close the list. Otherwise, we will not have time also to have our guests to react to your very interesting questions and comments. So the order will be the following. So first will be Graziella Attar-Previ from Malta, then Yelyzaveta Gardini from Italy, Pasión Gador Romero from Spain, Olga Onea from Romania, Pelin Jilic from Turkey, Marina Pendes from Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Daniela Blasanovic from Croatia. So now I give the floor for 1.5 minutes to Graziella Attar-Previ from Malta. Thank you.
Thank you. We are seeing here this morning that during and after armed conflicts, as in most realms of life, women and girls once again bear a disproportionate burden. The gender-based violence, the displacement, and the economic hardship that they face are really challenges and realities that we must all address effectively together, and we must implement the necessary policy measures together. And together is the key word that we must be using here this morning. Among others, we need to ensure that our legislations must recognize that sexual violence in conflict zones is a crime against humanity. Displacement must be addressed through a gender-based sensitive approach to humanitarian and recovery efforts. And let us stress the importance of women's participation in peace negotiations and post-conflict recovery. Here, I must mention our very own European Parliament President, Roberta Metsola, Malta's Roberta Metsola, who has been very active. She has been very vociferous. She has relentlessly been working in the peace and security agenda. We augur that we will have more women in such positions. To conclude, we commend efforts to adopt a gender lens to conflict analysis to reveal the broader dynamics of war. But we underline the importance of a commitment by all of us to implement effective policies to protect vulnerable populations and prevent future violence.
Thank you.
In line with this year's International Women's Day theme, Accelerate Action, let us take action promptly.
Thank you. I really I ask you to keep the time 1 minute and a half, unless that we will not have time to go to the whole list of speakers. So I would like to give the floor and welcome back in this chamber to Yelyzaveta Gardini from Italy. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the two speakers. I would like to thank Mariam Safi, who really struck me in expressing solidarity to all Afghan women who are undergoing a great ordeal. You said they only had the air they have to breathe left to them. There are so many men having to keep tabs on women because they fear that if their women infringe the rules, then they, the men, will end up in jail. That's really god-awful. I would like to go back to a point picked up on by Yelyzaveta Boryskina when mention was made of rape as a weapon of war. As I see it, we are not emphasizing this enough. This is a barbarous act which cannot be glossed over. Often it is glossed over and people even sometimes try to justify it. We've seen that in Ukraine. We saw that on October the 7th in Israel. We've been seeing it for years in Afghanistan, where women undergo tremendous violence under the Taliban regime. I think this is something we women in Europe ought to be thinking about, because you are fighting for this not to be forgotten every day. Why do people raise their voices against other crimes, whereas other crimes are played down? Victims ought to enjoy dignity across the board. Pasión Romero from Spain. Thanks, Chair. The voice of women is extremely important. Today we can defend ourselves only if we keep our voice heard. Women are swept aside in Afghanistan. More and more women are being rendered invisible in the world. We cannot allow for any second for men to trample on the presence of women across the board, particularly in decision-making for the rights of women. Half of the world population are important. The struggle for these rights has cost so many lives throughout our history. These rights may be swept aside at any moment. The disappearance and sweeping aside of women is a tangible threat right now in so many corners of the world. Let's not allow for this to happen in our immediate environment, in our own countries or elsewhere. We wish for women's voice really to be heard. Thank you very much, and let's keep an eagle eye on developments.
Yes, and
thank you.
To Olga Onea from Romania. Please, the floor is yours for 1 minute and a half.
Vă mulțumesc.
Thank you, dear colleagues. It is a pleasure for me to be with you, members of national parliaments of member states of the EU. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is a top priority for the foreign policy of the EU, and this is a very important topic globally. More women means good news, and this applies to the defense policy. The last analysis for 2024 showed that in the Ministry of Defense of Romania, the female staff represents 23%. And in the army, the percentage is 13% of the entire staff. The same document shows that in international missions, 12% of the entire staff are women. Equal opportunities, gender equality is is a priority for us, for Romania as a member in OSCE and NATO missions. And Romania has been integrated the gender dimension in all the aspects that have to do with national security. Equal opportunities are important for peacekeeping. When you have women in your team, the peace agreements can be more effective by 50%. When we have the role in our parliaments to adopt a legislative framework that creates a condition for delivering our commitments and our international commitments included. And I'm convinced that members of the parliament are best placed to mobilize everyone in the society and to capitalize on their efforts towards reaching our national goals. We need to stand united. These are key opportunities in order to shape effective policy.
Thanks. And now I would like to give the floor to Pelin Yilik from Turkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ich möchte meine Sprache auf Deutsch weiterführen.
I'll continue in German. It's undeniable that women bear the brunt of conflicts and crises throughout the world. Wars, conflicts, and acts of destruction affect not only cities and countries, but also the innocent parties, the forsaken children, and particularly women. We've seen this happen in many arenas of conflict, from Gaza to Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, and Ukraine. It's been painful to look at. We can't remember any time in recent history whereby women and children were so harshly struck. It's only been a few days since we saw the events in Rafah in Gaza. The so-called safe area was bombed, and Palestinian children were paraded in front of hospitals. They said, look, we want to live. So many civilians, including 16,000 children, have been slaughtered. We must make strenuous efforts to prevent these conflicts and wars and conflicts which destroy the lives of so many women and children.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Marina Pendes, Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you, both of you, Yelyzaveta and Mariam, for your statement and based on experience in your countries. We, together, must send strong message from this session. We must support our colleagues, women from Ukraine, from Afghanistan, and women around the world where have a conflict, like my colleagues say. And if I have some suggestion for you, President, to initiate some conference based on the UN Resolution 1325 this year in UN in September with two topics. One, human rights, women rights, femicide, genocide, based on the Afghan woman experience. And second, stop sexual violence in the zone of conflict, because rape is crime against humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the suggestion. We will take it into consideration to see if that will be possible. Last but not least, I would like to give the floor to Daniela Blasanović from Croatia. The floor is yours for 1 minute and a half. Thank you.
Ja ću govoriti na hrvatskom. Poštovana predsjedavajuća, srdačno pozdravljam vas i vaše kolege. Pozdravljam sve prisutne u ovoj dvorani, sve dame i gospodu. Dolazim iz države Hrvatske, koja je nedavno, prije 90-ih godina...
I come from Croatia, a country which has also undergone war.
Okay, it was an interpretation. So if you could just restart, sorry about that, because there was no, sorry about that.
Sve vas lijepo pozdravljam, osobito vas, poštovana predsjedavajuća. Dolazim iz Hrvatske, zemlje...
Welcome to everybody here. I'm from Croatia, a country which 30 years back underwent a war. And during this war, we saw the participation of 14,530 female volunteers who stood up for their country. So we have felt war in the flesh. These women not only acquired military experience during this war, what's more, they played a very important role in the post-war period. Having lost their husbands, offspring, and family members. Despite this, they managed to rebuild their country and created a safe environment. Therefore, let's not play down the role of women both during the war and in its wake. We must continue to keep talking about their bravery and their forbearance. We women are braver and more patient than men. Therefore, I believe that we women must be brave enough to stick our heads above the parapet and take part in international politics. In Croatia, we say that women sustain the 3 pillars of the house. We can sustain the 3 pillars of the world as well in order to keep peace around the world.
With this She Atlas, we finished. Thank you very much. And I would like to give the floor back to our speakers for 3 minutes each. And I will ask also my colleague Joanna to replace me because I have to go to another event here in the Parliament. But I will see you back in the lunch that is organized later on, so you will not see me for just a moment, but I give you with my colleague Joanna, and now please the floor is yours for 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, I will be the first to reply to your questions and give maybe some food for thoughts. If we are talking about the cyber attacks, and yeah, I think there is no person who asked this, but I'll intervene about this. I would say that this is good to establish an expert group who will monitor the cyber attacks and the bullying or maybe the deepfake situations that are happening around the women and the internet. And it's also about the education for both women and men on how to deal with that and how to work with that and how to actually avoid such situations. If we are talking about male speakers, I absolutely agree, but I would like to also point out that it should not be populistic, because what I faced personally is that sometimes it happens that it's a lot of populism, no actions, and women are more about the actions. And that's my personal experience. So, of course, I'm for male speakers here, absolutely, more than welcome. Feminism is all about that. But if we will be talking about the real things. Third point is I really appreciate all of the support from the countries, and I actually really closely followed the situation in Poland with the abortion, and I really support on what women are doing there and how they are standing for themselves. And I will be actually joining the Women's March in Poland after this event when I'll go back. If we're talking about holding accountable for the crimes, there was, for example, a Reykjavik conference where there was a discussion about holding accountable for crimes against Ukraine, etc., etc. And then we met, I was the part of the Youth Advisory Council, and we met in Bundestag and we started discussing that. And we faced the question on how to actually hold accountable Russian Federation, and we didn't find, as of right now, any solution, but I'm sure that we should work on that as well. Knowing, for example, that in Russian Federation there is no law, like the exact law that will save and protect Russian women from raping, from any gender-based violence. So how can we help them them accountable. We have to work on that. I'm running out of time. I thank you very much for questions. If there's anything I can answer after the conference, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would like to have a floor for Mariam Safi from Afghanistan.
Thank you. I just want to answer the question with regards to the feminist foreign policy. Right after the fall of Kabul and the military takeover by the Taliban, European countries that had a feminist foreign policy were the first to immediately respond, and I saw that response in three particular ways. One, they started playing an incredibly crucial role in ensuring that the crisis women and girls in Afghanistan were facing were still kept on the international agenda, even though there were competing crises around the world. So they made sure that that was still on the agenda. Secondly, they made funding both they started dedicating funding to Afghan civil society organizations, women-led organizations that were still or could still operate inside of the country, and they made that funding flexible, and they made it adaptable. And that really was what helped us continue our work, because we all had to rebuild our organizations. Flexible funding, without it, we really couldn't have. And so that helped nurture that small civic space that was still left. And that civic space continues to exist now, but it's under threat. And thirdly, they were able to, through their efforts, they were able to shoulder the calls for accountability. And so that was another area. So those were three particular areas where this support was incredibly important. And countries where there has been changes in government and feminist foreign policies have now been slashed away, we've seen the immediate impact in Afghanistan. So there is certainly there, and I must say another key aspect of this is ensuring protection measures for women and girls in the funding that is given. That's also something that is always highlighted. So it's really important. It is crucial. It is fundamental. We have seen the impact of it firsthand. And that's why the backlash, the global backlash is scaring us so much, because we know that it's like a cycle. It will accelerate the process in Afghanistan. The process in Afghanistan will accelerate that happening globally. And it's just going to be an ongoing cycle of absolutely disastrous proportions. I'll stop there. Thank you very much for having me once again. And I'll look forward to answering any questions after the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have the end, and I would like to thank all of you, especially thank you for national parliaments, member of national parliaments, your candidates' parliament as well, and EFTA countries' parliaments as well. I think we have a very, very important discussion today. And I think at the end we have to say to ourselves, you have to be united. We have to be solidarity, all of we. And we have to impose our narrative. We have today, especially for men, we know that we have some men who are support us, but I think we need a more strong power to explain what does it mean women are fighting for peace every day and everywhere. At the end, the last thing, we have a catering area now. It will be on the third floor. On this building, the building's name is Antal Building. Thank you very much, and I am very happy to discuss with you on the lunchtime. Thank you.